Yo, 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 welcome back to the Anomalies of History, Part 6. And this is probably my favorite topic of all time. I've titled this The Rubik Pyramid. And as I said, if you've watched all of my episodes so far, in episode 1, I told you that a colleague of mine gave me the Fingerprints of the Gods by Graham Hancock book in 1999. And he simply asked me, who do you think built the pyramids and what were the function? I read that book. 3 months later, I gave the book back and I said, mate, I honestly have no idea who built the pyramids anymore, and I definitely don't know what the true function is, but I'm going to find out. And it's 2 decades later, I'm still on the hunt to try and figure out this giant puzzle. And that's what I think it is. I think the ancients left these elephants in the room for us to figure out as we become more advanced and more spiritually aware. This is the key. In the last chapter, I came across Stephen Mehler, who was a protege and student of Hakim, the wisdom keeper, that I got to spend time with in Egypt, where all this kind of starts. And it was through Stephen's book that I stumbled across this absolutely amazing author, Christopher Dunn. He's also from Manchester in England, same as me. And he's got a ton of experience working as a manufacturing engineer. His job is literally all about precision. And this book, oh my God, I just couldn't believe I'd never heard of it before. I read this about 5 years ago, and since then, Chris has now released 2 more books. His latest one is an updated version of this. But what I would like to show you is just how, this evolution, how the theories of the pyramid keep evolving. What I would like to do, I'm not going to explain it to you, but through that book, it was where I first saw this picture, and it really, really resonated with me. Having been inside the pyramid myself, having been inside the pyramid myself, I've climbed through them chambers. I've been up the grand chamber and I've been inside the king's chamber. And when people say it was a tomb, it just didn't resonate. It's impossible. There's no way it was built to carry the dead body of a king. It just absolutely makes no sense. But this really does make sense.
And then we come to the Giza power plant. So it was during those trips that I began to formulate a different approach to what my future days would be. Having been in researching this since 1977, and the past few years going through several life-threatening illnesses, I began to think about, okay, if I was going to spend my last days on Earth, what is the main thing I need to do? Do I need to go down to Pumapunku again? No. Do I need to gather more information on ancient machining? No. The thing is, I'll tell you a little story. I did online discussions, on bulletin boards, and it was after an article that I had published in Analog magazine, and it was called Advanced Machining in Ancient Egypt. And on this discussion board, I was accused of being a lone voice shouting into the wilderness, and nobody was listening. And this was basically an article that focused on some of the artifacts in the Petra Museum, which you all know of, it's down the road. And so that has changed. Now there are thousands of engineers going through Egypt. I have taken dozens of engineers myself. I've been around dozens of engineers in Egypt coming from all over the world, and they are definitely engaged. They see these artifacts through the same eyes I'm looking through, with the same background, and they are agreeing. So when it comes to the concept of peer review, I'm very happy that my work has resonated with my peers, which are actually technologists, those who actually do the work. And if we were to say, okay, let's build a pyramid power plant today, we probably won't be hiring any Egyptologists to help us. Not that I have anything against the Egyptologists, well, not much. So I wrote, of course, you know, talking to engineers and being an engineer, and being an engineer both in the UK and also the States, and having worked in several places around the States, several companies. Wherever you go, you find a different culture. You know, their language is slightly different. The way they describe things is a little different. And there's no two engineers who will actually take a project and design it and execute it the same way. In fact, my experience has been that if I get a job and I design the processes and do the work, and then I'm off doing something else, that job comes back and it goes to another engineer, they'll be hell-bent on finding another way to do it. That's just the nature of people. They want to put their own personal stamp on it. But the bottom line is that while we all have different views and different interpretations, the evidence that we are actually looking at doesn't change. It's there. It's there to be verified. And you know, if you want to come up with a different idea on how things are done, then you know, go see the evidence, do your own measurements. If you don't agree with my measurements, do your own, come up with your own interpretation. But at the end of the day, it all comes down to how do you do the work? What tools do you use? And essentially, you've got to prove your ideas. And that's the beauty of that's one thing I really enjoy about my my research and the path that I've taken, is that the evidence is unambiguous. You can go to the Giza plateau, you can look at the same artifacts I did, you can take your own measurements, you can observe, and come up with, pretty much you'll come up with the same thing. Because measurements, our modern instruments don't lie. And you know, it's people who actually use them, they may shade it a little bit, but you can't shade it enough or exaggerate it enough to actually dismiss the perfection and the accuracy and precision that you find in Egypt.
And welcome back. Now, that book alone was absolutely groundbreaking, especially for us enthusiasts. But it was this book that made me have another paradigm shift. Now, Chris went back to Egypt with his precision tools, which are, you know, not cheap, they're very expensive. And he started taking measurements. And he noticed that some of these sarcophaguses, some of these obelisks and statues, they have advanced precision techniques which cannot be done by hand. And we're told by mainstream that these people were chiseling and hacking away with their hands and lifting massive giant blocks without tools and machinery. I think it's just complete lies. And people say, well, where's the evidence of all the machinery? Well, just think about Star Wars, when you see those massive junkyards full of the spaceships, that, you know, all of these things would have been melted down or buried in the sand or recycled into weapons. It's quite easy. We're talking thousands of years ago. So it was through this book that Chris got me thinking about the precision of statues. From this picture here, you can see how you've got all this geometry, which really, for somebody to do that with their hands, it's basically impossible to be so accurate on both sides of a face, for example. So what I would like to show you now, this is a recent video with Ben from Unchartered interviewing Chris again, and they were researching these tiny little vases that have been discovered, and basically they're so precise that even with modern day advanced machinery, we could not get them as accurate. So I'd like to show this wonderful clip and say hello to Ben and Chris. Thank you for all your research, just to show you how important it is not only to look at these structures, but to look at how precise. This is where we're getting down to the nitty gritties and where you should start asking big questions.
Well, yeah, so I'm out here in Danville. This isn't the only reason that I came out here. And for people that are watching, we had, I've been out here a couple of days now, and we were doing some what I would call very interesting work yesterday out at Danville Metal Stamping. We were doing some, I guess, what would you call it, a series of metrology inspections on a collection of ancient Egyptian hardstone vases. Is it metrology inspection the right word for kind of what we were doing
You
out
could
there?
call it that. I mean, you know, it's using precision instruments to gather data from a manufactured item. So with the scans being out there and people downloading them and looking at them, we determined that kind of data is arcane and out of reach for most people,
Right.
who would be interested in the subject. And so it was determined by the team that it would be beneficial to do a conventional a check, the way we would when I first started in the tool rooms and do a check that way. So
Yeah.
essentially the object, the focus was on the roundness, how round the bowls were, or the vases are, and concentric.
Right.
So it's not just one area of the vase and checking that to see if it's round, but also be checking at the same time other areas of the vase to determine how concentric they are to where you rounded the vase up on a rotary table.
Right, yeah, and I'll put a bit of footage in this when I release this for sure, so people can see the type of thing we were doing. But I mean, I don't want to. I guess it would be hard to overstate it, but this is not something that has really ever been done before on these types of artifacts. I mean, I know we looked at the original vase. People that have seen the vase, the series of vase videos that we've produced, we focused on one vase initially, but you know, in the time since then, we've been lucky enough to have interested people with the means to do so go out and purchase a number of these vases, some with impeccable provenance,
Right.
you know, going back to the 1800s, and you know, also willing enough to sort of wrap them in bubble wrap and bring them over here to Danville for an inspection. And it's just like, this is not anything that, as far as I know, has really been done on these artifacts before.
Yeah. So at DMS yesterday, we had the two owners of vases. The original vase that was that you have a report by Mark Viston, which was probably some of the most brilliant writing I've read.
Agreed.
Absolutely amazing. And and then Matt Bell, who brought his vases up.
Yep.
And so, you know, everybody came together in the inspection department of Danville Metal Stamping and had a lot of fun.
We did.
And the results were mind-blowing.
They really were, and that's what I wanted to ask you about. So we talked a little bit about the process. I mean, that involved, essentially, we were, as you said, looking at concentricity, roundness. We also were looking at I think, what would you say, consistency of edge and wall thickness was another measurement we were taking.
Right.
But essentially, most of the measuring would involve centering the vases on a rotary table on a precision flat surface, and then mounting, you know, precision gauges that were measuring in kind of the 0.5 increments against the surface and rotating it and recording kind of the variance of measurements. But yeah, what did you said the results were momentous. I mean, and this is kind of a word I've heard you use to describe what we did yesterday as well. So what were your takeaways from what we did yesterday and what we saw in terms of the results?
Well, you know, when I relate back to the times that I've been through the Cairo Museum and the conversations that I hear other people having about the Egyptian vases and how extraordinarily precise they look, it's always been in the back of my mind. You know, I'd love to get one of those in an inspection lab.
Yeah.
And check it out, you know, conventionally. And yesterday was the day that we were able to do that. So it was momentous in that I think that it kind of brings down to more of a broader level, a broader group of people a better understanding of what we're talking about, because there's since the excellent video that you posted on the vase and the commentary followed it, there seemed to be significant misunderstanding about what it means.
Yeah.
And it's like, you know, unless you have some kind of technical background, it's hard to fill in all the gaps, because if you're not, I mean, this is not a criticism of anybody, because not everybody has a background in machining or in tool making or engineering, but there are a lot of interested parties out there who do have some technical education. And so, you know, when you discuss, well, this person is an engineer, right. The question then should be, well, what kind of an engineer is he or her? You know, are they mechanical engineer, electrical engineer, software engineer, computer engineer? I mean, there are so many different types of engineers. Right. And they all have their own language. They all have their own kind of environmental baked-in knowledge. And one of the issues that flows from that is that when they're communicating information and a concept, generally they don't convey a lot of the basis, a lot of the fundamental knowledge that most people that they work with, they assume they would already have that. Right.
Yeah, that's a really good point, because it's something I noticed as well. Like, there was a strong reaction to that vase work. I think rightly so, because it's to my mind, it's one of the few times we've seen sort of significant and real advancement in our understanding of some of these ancient artifacts. And I would consistently see that the people that are mechanical or metrology focused engineers, the machinists, the guys that work on instruments that, you know, they have to understand those basic principles, they sort of immediately get it. Right. And you'd see that, but then you'd see other people that don't have that background, that I think you called it arcane, kind of a black art with some of the scan results and the way it gets talked about. Yeah, I saw that as well with it, and I think there's also some of that's gone into, I think, a misunderstanding of some of it might have gone into some of the sort of even the criticism that comes from this. Although it's hard to criticize these absolute results, and I do think that's where some of the work we were doing yesterday, or you guys were doing, and I was just observing, will really help along those lines, because you're seeing real numbers. We're not like creating models of anything. We're actually measuring the real surface of these vases at, you know, scales that are kind of mind-blowing. Like, you know, we're talking single-digit thousandths of an inch. And just as a reminder, I've said it before, and we even measured this and got this on video, was that, you know, you can, and we measured, I pulled out some hair of on my head, and we measured like the thickness of a human hair being around 2 to 3 thousandths of an inch. Yeah. Stuck it on a, you know, Alex has stuck it on the table, and we put a gauge on it, and you could see that thickness, and we're talking about basically a similar depth of precision.
And welcome back. Now, it was through Chris's next book, which I'll get into in a next chapter, is called Giza, the Tesla Connection, and that's where I'm going to start getting more into Nikola Tesla as well. I came across this guy, Ahmed Adly, because he did the foreword for Chris's new book, which I couldn't wait to get my hands on. I had never heard of Ahmed Adly ever, and through the book, when I was reading the foreword, it mentions he has a YouTube channel, and he's had, as you can see here, I've highlighted number 9 of a 14-part phenomenal miniseries. Number 9 there has had 2.9 million views, and it's a video of Ahmed creating a 3D model, putting Chris's theory together and showing you how it all functions. And I'm going to show you a small clip from that. But what I want to point out for all these skeptics is, look, compared to all the other videos, there's 2.9 million people that have watched it. The Egyptians love Ahmed. They call him the 4th pyramid. And this is now showing you the amount of interest that this has gained. 10 years ago, everybody said I was crazy. And they said, oh, you know, the pyramids are tombs. Now you say the pyramid is a power machine. People say, oh, yeah, tell me more. Unbelievable. I've never seen it all come together like this. Thank you, Ahmed. Love you, brother.
اللي حصل في غرفة الملك. الغرفة السفلية في الهرم الأكبر، غرفة الملكة والبهو العظيم وغرفة الملك، مرورا بالممرات. محتاجين دلوقتي نربط النقط المختلفة دي ببعض ونشوف سيناريو مقترح من البداية للنهاية من أجل توليد الطاقة هيحصل إزاي داخل الهرم.
Welcome back. So then, after reading the book and watching the YouTube, I had to get hold of this guy and get him on my podcast. And I reached out to him and he just agreed. And it was a wonderful interview. In fact, he shared it on his massive network and it's been the biggest hit I've had on my Spotify. I had over 15,000 listeners, which was just phenomenal. And I just want to say thank you to Ahmed. I would like to show you a little clip from our interview on my own Spotify account. Let's go. Now, Chris Dunn's book was the first time that I got so many answers to the missing pieces of the puzzle. And then I mentioned your video. That was the best and most logical explanation for the true function of the pyramids. Can you explain to the listeners, the new listeners, how these pyramids may have worked based on the latest research and discoveries?
I'm talking about Giza or in general, terms.
Just focusing on the Giza for now, yeah.
Yeah. So a lot of more research is currently in progress in scan pyramids and also the GD and also other missions. What I think that about the vibrations under the Giza plateau, this makes sense, which is the hypothesis or the idea. Not the idea now, it is actually a fact from Ferdinand Freund, which says that the tectonic plates of the Earth was moving, and this leads to shooting up electrons to top, and pyramids is working as electron harvester. We actually currently planning to do some exercise about that with authorities in Egypt.
Wow.
Currently still in progress. For that, we're still looking for some permissions. But I think if it is done and the measure of the data log gives us a good result about that, I think this will be important proof for Chris Dunn's theory and also Ferdinand Freund. However, I think also the pump theory that from John Cadman is also, for me, makes a lot of sense, because I found a statement in one of the Arab historian writers that the pyramid builders put, this actually happened happened 1 year after I published the video. The pyramid builders put pumps underneath the pyramid. He stated it literally like this. They put pumps under the pyramid, and of course pumps was something like known, but when someone said they put pumps under the pyramid, this like was shocking to me. Oops. I'm pretty sure that John Kerman didn't read this statement before proposing his theory. So I think both were combined together. So during the flood season, water was working, and during and also for some other periods, there was also this seismic vibrations underneath the plateau. So it is combined together, not just one.
I see. So my basic sort of view of this, what I've learned, I heard there was two shafts, and one of them is positively charged water, which is like your lunar, and then the negative charged water is your solar. So you'll have like water above the ground and water underground, and those two forces would come down into the subterranean channel. And what was very interesting was that video where the construction of the subterranean channel, how the water would spin around, which would create the force and generate what's called a ram pump, where the water would fill up the subterranean channel and it would make a boom, boom, boom. And then you'd have the electrons in the igneous rock underground, which is what Friedman and Freud's talking about. He called them earthquake lights. And you have these circular pockets of energy, which naturally they want to find the highest topography, right? So they would race all the way up to the top of the pyramid, which is basically causing some kind of I guess electric charge. So as the water's gone into the two forms of negative and positive water go into the subterranean channel, that gets then pumped up into the Queen's chamber, correct? And then what happens next? Because at the beginning of this podcast, we talked about the original theory where the two shafts that run into the Queen's chamber and the King's chamber, I was originally led to believe that they were the shafts for the dead king to go out. But if that was the case, there was never anybody supposed to be in the Queen's chamber, so that would make absolutely no sense in the design of it, right? So it's said that there was two forms of chemicals that would come down these shafts. What were the two chemicals?
Okay, so the subterranean chamber was used mainly to as a pulse generator. Either
pulse generator.
A pulse generator, yeah. And these pulses will go up through the Great Pyramid, and that's why the Great Pyramid was built with large stones. This makes a lot of sense, actually.
Yes, totally.
To be able to bear this pulse. Now in the same time, two chemicals were put into the Queen's chamber. This chemicals is zinc chloride.
Yep. And
HCl, which is hydrochloric acid. It can also be other type of acid. It can be H2SO4 as proposed by Dr. Cohen. The products of these two chemicals, whatever they are, is hydrogen.
Yeah.
Right. So, and the hydrogen, when hydrogen is formed, it will go through the shaft of the Queen's chamber and then goes up to the Grand Gallery. And then from the Grand Gallery, it goes to the King's chamber.
So just hang on 1 second, just for the listeners, because this is the technical point of view. So what you're doing is using these two chemicals to separate the hydrogen from the charged water that's come pumped up through the subterranean chamber. And then you have now charged hydrogen that gets forced out of the Queen's chamber into the Grand chamber. Now, just before we get to that point, when was it the Queen's chamber where they put the robot up the shaft?
Yes.
And they found a door, and the critics will say that this door is a magical door for the king. Yeah. Don't forget, it's supposed to be the King's chamber where the sarcophagus was for the king, not the Queen's chamber. And I just want to point out, to get into these chambers, if there was a load of people trying to carry a dead body, you'd be on your knees like trying to. It's just stupid. If you're going to build, I think it was you that put in your video that if you're going to build a temple for a tomb for a dead king, you would have big doors at the bottom. You make it very easy access. But what I just want to point out is when they found this door, there are two electrodes on the door, which shows that the chemicals, when they come down the shaft, they can be, what do you call the word? They can be regulated. So this door would act like a regulator that would allow certain chemicals to come through to allow this reaction. But they discovered something behind that door when they managed to find, you know, the robot that was capable of drilling through it. According to Chris, they found a little stump of a site ticket from 1970. And the only way that paper stump could have got in the back of this door in a chamber was if it had have blown in from an outlet outside in the desert, which I was going to ask you, where were the chemicals entered into the pyramid? And there's these giant big holes in the ground outside, and there's a tunnel which is now boarded off. But that could have been the entrance, and that would make sense if they were pouring these chemicals from the outside, so they didn't have to interfere with the structure, just like you would do in any power plant. So that, to me, is a really big piece of evidence there. They found a piece of paper behind a door that's never been opened, and the only way that could have got in there is if it had blown in a sandstorm from the outside before that hole was boarded up, correct? Is that fact?
I will tell you a nice story. I was in December 2023 in the Queen's Chamber with a group, and there was an engineer named Jan. He was a radar engineer, and he was like making cleaning for the shaft, and he asked a question. Wow, what is this sand? Where it comes from? There's a lot of sand in the shaft.
Cool.
I said to him, do you think that this shaft may be open, exposed to the outside? I said, okay, this is the only justification, because a lot of sand, like maybe 300, 400 grams in very short distance. The other thing that he smelled some. He said, and this is like weird odor. It looked like
rotten eggs.
I told him chemicals. Yes, it looks like
sulfur smell. Yeah.
Yeah. He was not aware of Christopher Dunn theory, because he was focusing on radar, GPRs specifically, and I told him I'd start to explain him Christopher Dunn theory about the reaction of the Queen's Chamber. He said, I think this is the only reason why that this shaft is exposed to something outside, because what we see here is, I think there is a ways to prove this. There's ways to prove this, because this also Christopher put in his video and his book, that there is some, like a small panel on the right side of one of the shafts that could be connected to outside. If it is, then it will raise up during the using the normal capillarity phenomena. You know, when you have water, and when you have a thin tube of glass, the water will raise automatically to it as part of the capillarity phenomena. So if there is,
all you need to do, really, I think I can't remember who mentioned it, maybe it was Chris, but all you need to do is just pump water from the outside and see if it comes into the shaft, which they will never allow. But that would be one way to figure out where that water goes, right? Even if you had a ton of water inside the Queen's Chamber and you pumped it up the shaft, where would it come out? Where would it exit? There have to be an exit point, and that would prove that point, 100%. And welcome back. Now, again, on the books, I've mentioned Stephen Mehler before. Now, this book, the second book, was called From Light into Darkness, The Evolution of Religion in Ancient Egypt. And this was another massive paradigm shift for me. Now, I won't go too much into the book. I definitely recommend you go and buy all the books that I'm recommending on here. If you're interested in this subject, they're absolutely amazing. It was through this book that I started paying more attention to the gentleman who we see on the front cover, who not many people probably know. This guy, his name is King Akhenaton, which, look at him. If you remember in a previous chapter, I mentioned the statue of Venus, and it had specific features like a big belly, you know, thin face. You don't really know if that's a man or a female, okay? So it's what we call androgynous. But interesting thing, if you think about his name, Akhenaton, I don't know, but we've been talking a bit about etymology. To me, it sounds like the atom or Adam. That's my name, Adam. And this could be, you know, the creator, or everything comes from the atom, right? I don't know. I'm just assuming this one, but I find it interesting. So who is Akhenaton? Akhenaton, as you can see on here, I have highlighted it in yellow, was actually the father of Tutankhamun. And we're going to get into the possible mother of Tutankhamun, which we're not sure who it is. But if you look at the bottom here, there's in red, it says the younger lady, a mysterious person called the younger lady, which could have been Tutankhamun's real mother. But for some reason, the link from Wiki has been removed, as always. All right. What we do know from history is that these families were all interbreeding, right? So it's my belief, possibly, that Akhenaton could have been some kind of alien species that has come down, as I mentioned before with the Ishtar story, that their job was to try and create a new species that would become the slave race. But to do that, they would need to be able to mate and have children with another species. And at the beginning, they couldn't do that. And they would have basically had to have experimented, possibly using animals, monkeys, whatever you want to say. But it just seems strange to me, especially when you look at the features. Let me just click back. When you look at the features of Akhenaton, he doesn't look exactly human. He's got the long, elongated head as well. And notice the snake on the front. There's some more snake worship. What that means, I'm not sure. But it's interesting, having discussed previously about the whole Anunnaki, that this, to me, seems suspicious. Here we have a guy who is the father of Tutankhamun, and interestingly, Tutankhamun, maybe a lot of people don't know this, but he was actually a mutant. I'm just going to read this here. Using computerized tomography, scans of his mummified body, scientists have conducted a virtual autopsy of Tutankhamun, the boy king who ruled Egypt some 3,300 years ago. The scans suggest that he suffered from numerous deformities and ailments caused in part by inbreeding within his family. And a DNA analysis found traces of malaria and Koller disease, a rare and painful bone disorder, along with evidence that his parents were siblings, a common practice among ancient Egyptian royalty. Now, it's known even in today that royal families are always inbreeding. So, in fact, Tut himself apparently married his half-sister. The test suggests that he had a club foot, an overbite, womanly hips, and couldn't walk unaided due to his foot and Koller disease. And he only lived a short period of time. Now, what is this Koller disease? Koller disease is a rare bone disorder of the foot in children that may be the result of stress-related compression at a critical time during the period of growth. It is categorized by limping caused by pain and swelling in the foot. And it most often occurs in children between the ages 3 to 7 and affects males 5 times more often than females. Now, what I think we're looking at here is the process of genetic experimentation, trying to get the perfect DNA match to create the perfect slave human. This is what I believe is unraveling. Now, just think, remember the famous movie, Jurassic Park? What were they doing? They were taking DNA from lizards, from dinosaurs, and bringing them back to life. And just think about that. What I just said then about Akhenaton, he's come from another planet, maybe. He needs a partner. He hasn't got a partner. So he's able to somehow reproduce male and female organs and start creating these mutant children, which eventually they will perfect over time. And I think that's what the royal bloodlines have been doing with all of us. This is the story of genetics, and we'll be getting into that later. Now, I just want to show you a clip because this film's a superb mummy film. I'm a massive movie fan, and it also introduces Charlton Heston into my story, which is this will become important later on. I want to show you just a little trailer from this film. If you haven't watched it, go and check it out. Boom.
Through the ages, the ancient monuments of Egypt have been hunting grounds for archaeologists, tourists, and grave robbers. One by one, the sacred tombs of pharaohs and queens have been violated, yielding their priceless treasures and occult mysteries. But the evil one, Kara, has slept undisturbed for thousands of years, waiting for the awakening.
She must have killed thousands.
Kara, you must be forever alone. Do not approach Kara, lest your soul be withered.
The inscription was a warning for mankind. For all those who take part in her awakening are doomed. Charlton Heston, obsessed by the awakening, intrudes where no man should go.
I'm frightened.
Susanna York disobeys the ancient warning that threatens to destroy her.
You're going to try the ritual, aren't you?
Stephanie Zimbalist defies the deadly legend and brings forth the terror. The evil one must be forever alone. She must not live again. For 4,000 years, she has been silent and dead and waiting for the awakening. They thought they had buried her forever.
So it's my belief that actually these mummies were preserved in these unbelievably hard coffins for, millenniums, because eventually the royal bloodlines, when they would go back and discover these mummies, they could take the DNA from these demigods or whatever, these people that had, in crazy power or ancient knowledge, and they could genetically modify them or reincarnate them to come back with the memories. And this is kind of what Elon Musk is suggesting now with Neuralink. So don't tell me this is not a possibility anymore. It's just insane, right? This is where I finally get to introduce Mel Brooks, who will become a big part of this story. And why is Mel Brooks so important? Well, he produced some of the greatest films of all time. It's specific to specific times in history, and he also created an incredible platform for this gentleman here, whose name is Gene Wilder. And we'll get into Gene's in the next chapter. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you in part 7. Awesome. Have a large.